Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the National Intel Report. I'm your host, John Statmiller, live from the studios Republic Broadcasting Network on this Tuesday, 24 February 09. We'll be with our guest here, Mr. Robbie Noel and Mr. Bob Chapman, an international forecaster, here in just a couple of minutes.
Get ready for Real Talk Radio. You're listening to the National Intel Report with your host, John Statmiller.
Paging Bob Chapman. Bob Chapman, come in, please.
I'm in the process of aging, so I can't come in.
Robbie Noel, where art thou?
I'll be here.
Okay, man. What did you think about Mr. Bernanke's? Evidently, it had some positive effect. I was watching during his live speech today, his testimony in front of the Senate. I'm watching the Dow go up to 80 points, drop down to 55. I think the Dow finished up at, 250 positive territory, but that's only after agonizing and vacillating and probably pumping money into the stock market as they spoke. But what did you think of Mr. Bernanke's little abbreviated testimony there, gentlemen?
Well, if the dog had not stopped in the middle of the road to go to the bathroom, he wouldn't have got run over by the truck.
That's the same thing I walked. It was shades of Alan Greenspan. Alan Greenspan, the dog-faced boy, would drone on endlessly, and people were straining to find meaning within the $10 words he would throw around, and everybody would walk away shaking their head with their hands in their pockets going, what did I just hear? That was about as clear, because he was being hard-pressed. Up until this, what the listeners didn't hear is senator after senator asking Mr. Ben Shalom Helicopter Bernanke, this money you guys have, where is it going, and how soon can we expect a turnaround in the economy? And you heard Mr. Bernanke's response that it's not going to happen this year. We're looking for it to happen, and the markets start to go up in 2010. And now he alluded to these doomsayers, without using that term, that in fact that a lot of people in the marketplace out there are predicting 2011 and beyond. I'm looking at this and going, this ain't working and ain't never going to work.
This was a CNBC rally in the market today.
How so? Do you mean CNBC rally?
Well, I mean, they emphasized two things that he said. The recession is going to end in 2009, and we got recovery in 2010. And if you buy into the concept that Wall Street looks ahead 6 to 12 months down the road, is reason for the rally promoted by CNBC.
Well, gentlemen, the recession, he said recession, didn't use the D word, but we're on a downhill slide. All things considered, gentlemen, what does a depression make? Okay, what we didn't have in 29 is this massive debt. What we didn't have is massive bank failures. What we had is a little irrational exuberance from the Fed Reserve itself, along with the help of the government back in the 20s, that kind of mounted a little bit too many dollars chasing too few real goods out in the marketplace. We understand that. That's the inherent flaw with the funny money system, the boom and the bust cycles. Marked difference between 29 and today. Already we're seeing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of job losses, and this is the first year of their declared recession. Gentlemen, when did they officially declare the recession? Wasn't it back this past summer?
Yeah, December.
Okay,
December.
A
year after, a year later.
A year later.
But let me tell you, and because Ben Bernanke made this point over and over again in his testimony. The model that he is using is the 1929 model of the Great Depression.
And he's a great student of it.
Absolutely. And this is where the flaw comes in, because over the weekend I was at the Cambridge House, the Canadian Investment Conference, the Phoenix Conference takes place. Bob used to be a great participant. As a matter of fact, Bob, just to digress slightly, you got a compliment yesterday from a Canadian listener who attends the Calgary sessions and has been doing so ever since its inception, where he told me there were 600 plus people in Phoenix on Saturday, biggest crowd in Phoenix per se, and he said, I went to the last conference in Calgary, and all of the newsletter writers now all sound like Bob Chapman. But the fact is at the conference, every single one of them, whether it was Peter Gangrich or Bill Murphy or Sean Brudstick or Tom Calandra or Jason Hormel or Ted Butler, they all drew comparisons to the 1873 market crash as more aligned with where we are today than the 1929. So Ben Bernanke is looking at the wrong model. And so my question to Bob is, because obviously I haven't studied in depth the collapse in 1873, and your knowledge of what happened back then, were all the speakers at this conference correct in drawing our attention to we better study the 1873 model as opposed to the 1929 model?
Well, it's understandable that you wouldn't remember the 1873 model because you probably didn't deeply study the history of America or American finance, being that you grew up in Rhodesia. But they all talked to each other, and they came to that conclusion. The problem is I was citing that 3 and 4 years ago, and one of the problems you have in citing that, and it is much closer to what we have today, is that nobody knows about it except the writers. And so what's important is that they all know about the 1930s depression. And so it's much, much easier to make people understand by making the comparisons with that time and entity. You lose the audience when you talk about 1873. They say, gee, isn't that when the Civil War got over? I mean, Americans and Canadians, for that matter, are sorely lacking in history. And to cite something as far back as that is fine. You say it's like 1873, but most people don't know about that. So let's talk about the 1930s. At least some of the people are familiar with the Great Depression. And, you know, there were 4 depressions in between that time, too, in the United States, never mind the different ones that occurred all over the world. And so we don't have to compare it to anything. We're in a depression. It just began. The recession is over. Long live the recession. They'll never call it a depression. It'll always be a deeper recession, word semantics, to mislead the people. There isn't going to be any recovery because the genesis and the nexus of all of this is deliberate. They have no intention of having a recovery. They're dancing you around. So we are going to go from one disaster to another because it's planned that way. January of next year, they'll be voting for a $2 trillion stimulus package. And by that time, all of the largesse that's come out of Congress and from the Fed will be somewhere in the vicinity of $20 trillion. And there'll still be no recovery because they're not doing the right thing. They're not allowing companies that have destroyed themselves to go under. I mean, who cares if we have to adjust the banking system? Let's let all the major banks and brokerage houses go down. There's others to take their place. So it's all about a vested interest being funded to keep the ball going as long as they want it to go until they want to pull the plug. And they will pull the plug once they have a wider war and they can draft American boys and girls to go off to someplace else so they will not demonstrate in America and perhaps even become more militant than that. And I notice the Army is has ordered and is being delivered riot equipment, and they're getting ready. I don't think it's on the horizon next week, but it will come sooner or later. And what we're hearing on these different programs is conditioning. They're getting ready, and they're saying the bubbas are going to come, and they're going to attack the government.
Now,
because
Bob,
bubbas are stupid people.
Yeah, well, and some of what Bernanke also said today, Bob and Robbie, that the Treasury is going to buy the convertible preferred stocks in the 19 largest U.S. banks.